Welcome. In this video, the event, Twilight of Wolumonde, will be summarized. Throughout the video, there will be spoilers for the story of Arknights. If you don't want to be spoiled, please go and play the game. Tatiana approaches Severin, her uncle, as he sits underneath an oak tree outside of Wolumonde, smoking his third pack of cigarettes that day. She urges him to quit, concerned about his worsening cough. Severin dismisses her worries, remarking how he's warned her not to emulate his bad habits. Their conversation shifts to the tension in the town, particularly concerning the burial of the dead, with the council deciding that infected bodies should be buried outside without funerals. Severin is troubled, remembering the deceased townfolk fondly and lamenting how people like Eckenhard and Kevin, who weren't infected, are being treated no better than the infected. He reluctantly agrees with the council's decision, but holds on to the hope that help from the Jarmondier will allow for more respectful treatment of the dead. Meanwhile, the situation in Wolumonde worsens, with the town off course and growing more unstable. Severin, despite his personal grief over the loss of his son, Thor, remains determined to ensure the bodies are cared for until proper experts arrive. Tatiana, torn between her duty and her feelings, questions why they must treat their dead so poorly. Severin reassures her that they'll wait for aid, and he's prepared to stand firm against the council if necessary. As the conversation ends, Severin requests a moment alone with Thor, expressing his readiness to fight for his boy's dignity despite knowing how fragile their situation has become. Wolumonde, a once thriving nomadic town, is now fraught with tensions between its residents and the infected. Severin, the town Schultz, faces growing unrest as rumors spread about a fire and a potential plot surrounding the mysterious disappearance of Dr. Atro, a respected infected physician. As Severin grapples with the protesters' demand for answers, Rhodes Island operators, Folonik and Suzerain, arrive to investigate, quickly sensing the town's fragile state. Severin is caught between managing political strife and his personal loss, as his son perished in the same fire the infected believe was a conspiracy. Meanwhile, the town council grows anxious about the Rhodes Island investigation, fearing repercussions from both the infected and external forces. Severin, visibly fatigued and disillusioned by the town's troubles, dismisses the council's concerns but acknowledges the situation's gravity. Despite his strained demeanor, he cooperates with the visiting operators, revealing the bare truth of Dr. Atro's disappearance. Tensions simmer as Folonik suspects deeper hidden motives in Wolumonde, and a looming question remains: what really happened to Dr. Atro, and how will the town's fragile peace be maintained? Folonik and Suzerain walk through the eerily quiet, infected quarter of Wolumonde, observing how the residents live under restricted conditions. Folonik notes that while the infected aren't treated with overt hostility, their lives are still confined as if it were an open-air prison. The streets, once filled with thriving businesses, are now barren. Folonik's concern for her missing friend, Dr. Atro, weighs heavily on her, even as she acknowledges the complex political situation. The group, joined by Tatiana, discusses the rising tensions in Wolumonde, where protests and unrest simmer among the infected. As they navigate the district, tensions rise when they encounter a rebellious townsfolk. The confrontation reveals that the locals blame the authorities for the fire that took many lives, including, possibly, Dr. Atro. Folonik's anger surfaces, but Tatiana urges calm, trying to navigate the complicated web of mistrust between the townspeople and the government. Folonik remains focused on uncovering the truth about her friend, determined to solve the growing crisis with the help of Rhodes Island. Despite the challenges, Suzerain remains optimistic, trusting that their mission will ultimately bring relief to the infected of Wolumonde. Folonik and Suzerain arrive at a destroyed campsite, where Tatiana recounts the tragic fire that claimed the lives of Dr. Atro and her patients. Despite initial beliefs that the fire was an accident, evidence suggests it was caused by someone's original arts, as the heat was too intense for regular fire. Among the victims was Tatiana's friend, Thorwald, who wasn't infected but was helping out of kindness. Overcome by emotions, Tatiana struggles to express her grief, while Suzerain encourages her to release the pain she's been bottling up. As the conversation shifts, they discuss the remains and the fate of the victims, with Tatiana mentioning the hasty burial of the dead due to lack of infected experts. Volumonde is determined to inspect the remains herself, including Atros, whose badge miraculously survived the fire. Suddenly, the town is thrown into chaos as explosions are heard, and they rush back to find armed infected stirring unrest. Severin is locked in a tense confrontation with the infected, torn between maintaining order and the rising threat of violence. Greythroat, Click, and Irescarp investigate Atros' death, finding Rhodes Island supply crates near the scene of the fire. Greythroat suspects Atros' ID badge was lost in the blaze, while Irescarp reflects on the catastrophe's destruction of Wolumonde. They debate setting up camp outside of town and prepare for possible danger. Meanwhile, Severin and the council discuss the town's famine and unrest, with tensions rising due to traitors among them and the looming threat of winter. Tatiana and Suzerain assist Severin, who fears the growing chaos will lead to more destruction. As tensions between the infected and non-infected escalate, Volumonde demands answers for Atros' murder. Severin reveals that the weapon used to kill Atro was an arts core, potentially implicating someone skilled in originum arts. Mudrock, a mysterious infected, crosses paths with the team, claiming no allegiance to Reunion, but hinting at deeper involvement in the town's chaos. Though Greythroat questions Mudrock, no concrete answers are given, leaving Rhodes Island operators on edge as they navigate the unfolding conflict in Wolumonde. Volumonde and Suzerain find themselves in a desolate part of town bathed in a pale blue light, witnessing a mysterious song echoing through the streets. As they discuss the origins of the haunting melody, Severin arrives, revealing it as a Winter Wisps ballad tied to ancient rituals. The Winter Wisps, local mountain-dwelling Capernae, are blamed for recent attacks and growing unrest. As tensions escalate, Severin orders a manhunt to quell the conflict between infected and non-infected, despite Suzerain's pleas to stop before the situation worsens. Volumonde questions Severin's motives, hinting at deeper unresolved tensions stemming from settler colonialism and aristocratic interests. Amidst the chaos, an explosion rocks the town and the situation spirals out of control as protests intensify and fires break out. The town's fragility unity crumbles, with both sides growing increasingly hostile. Severin, realizing the gravity of the situation, puts the town under martial law, but Suzerain urges him to reconsider. As the Rhodes Island operators arrived, including Greythroat and Irescarp, they rush to rescue Volumonde and Tatiana, who are trapped amidst the escalating violence. Despite the mounting pressure, Suzerain remains focused on saving the civilians, while the operators prepare for a dangerous mission to restore order. Tatiana wakes up disoriented and dizzy, realizing her ankle is numb and the surroundings eerily quiet. Greythroat reassures her that the rebels in the area have been subdued, but Tatiana remains uneasy about the fate of Miss Volumonde and the loss of Atro, who sacrificed herself. Greythroat confirms Volumonde's safety, but remains contemplative about the complexity of the situation. Meanwhile, Volumonde and Irescarp confront a rebellious town person who reveals that the town's Germandier was diverted for a noble's wedding, leaving the town defenseless. The conversation intensifies as the rebels express their anger towards Lithinian aristocrats and their corrupt governance, with Reunion further complicating matters. Suzerain learns from a man claiming to be the last of the Winter Wisps that Biederman, a once presumed dead catastrophe messenger, led the riot and destroyed the power plant. Severin, though doubtful of the man's identity, is shocked at the possibility of Biederman's survival and involvement. Suzerain believes the Winter Wisps were not behind the chaos, yet Severin notes how rioters use their name as an excuse. Despite his illness, Severin reflects on how Biederman, once blamed for a previous catastrophe, might seek vengeance, giving emotional grounds for his actions. Severin also reveals that Dr. Atro once helped Biederman after he hit rock bottom, though Biederman's melancholic demeanor never raised suspicions. As the town spirals into chaos, with the citizens blaming the Winter Wisps and the infected, Severin and the others realize the full scale of the conflict, which has now drawn in insurgents and militia. Folinick gathers clues pointing to Biedermann's involvement in the uprising, but Greythroat later discovers Biedermann's body, indicating he died hours before. The riots continue, and Severin, severely ill with oropathy, pleads for Rhodes Island's help to restore peace, admitting his own role in the town's suffering, while Folinick wrestles with the emotional aftermath of losing Dr. Atro. Insurgents torch homes and panic spreads among the townfolk. Severin lies wounded while Tatiana struggles to regain control, calling for defensive arts to fend off invaders. Amid the turmoil, one of the townsfolk succumbs to flames, his agonizing screams haunting Tatiana. As she grapples with the horror of the situation, armed rebels taunt her, threatening to burn her alive. Meanwhile, Mudbrak and the Sarkaz observe from the outskirts, resigned to the town's fate, believing that no one will survive the oncoming destruction. Suzerain bravely steps in, using her arts to push back the insurgents, but she is quickly overwhelmed by their relentless attacks. In a parallel scene, Folinick and Greythroat debate the futility of the ongoing violence, mourning the loss of Dr. Atro. The infected rebels press on, driven by a desire for revenge and liberation, while Rhodes Island operators, including Severin, fight to protect the remaining townsfolk. Mudrock ultimately orders a retreat, realizing that, despite their victories, the cycle of violence will only lead to further devastation. Irescarp confronts Severin and Greythroat, revealing his suspicions that Biedermann, a catastrophe messenger, was behind the Wolumonde disaster. Although evidence is scarce, Greythroat admits that Biedermann had both the opportunity and the motive to orchestrate the chaos. Despite the utilitarian nature of some catastrophe messengers, Severin remains conflicted, pointing out that Biedermann's limited knowledge of Lithinian technology complicates the theory. The conversation shifts to the deeper issue of trust and responsibility, with Severin acknowledging that the truth may remain elusive, but maintaining Biedermann as their prime suspect. As the discussion continues, the group reflects on the consequences of the disaster, the ongoing riots, and the strained relationship among survivors. Severin, now weakened by his infection and coughing violently, recalls his past struggles and regrets, acknowledging the futility of vengeance. Greythroat, though fearful of the infected, presses Severin to seek medical attention. Meanwhile, Folinick and Suzerain grapple with their own personal emotional scars and the uncertain future of Wolumonde, which still faces many unresolved problems. Severin, exhausted, drifts into a dream of hope, imagining a future where the town is lifted from catastrophe and rebuilt. In a flashback, Severin visits Biedermann, whose wounds have healed, and updates him on the state of his home, which has been severely damaged, save for his safe. Biedermann, feeling detached from the community, despite living there for years, reflects on his predicament. Severin warns him about the lack of Jarmonde and the fragile state of Wolumonde's security, suggesting that he avoid drawing attention. Biedermann's unease grows as he anticipates the town's worsening conditions and his own role in it. A mysterious figure later confronts Biedermann, urging him to lead a rebellion to draw attention to Wolumonde's plight and atone for his perceived sins. This figure seems intent on inciting violence and exploiting Biedermann's guilt and fear. Despite the figure's assurances and threats, Biedermann is conflicted and unsure if he should act on the warnings or protect Dr. Atro in the town. As the figure departs, leaving Biedermann with a core of a granophone unit, he grapples with the looming chaos and his role in it, questioning his own responsibility and the potential for violence. Mudrock and a Sarkaz warrior discuss their dire situation, with Mudrock advising to avoid search parties and head home before winter sets in. Despite the cold and uncertainty, Mudrock suggests returning to Kazdel, a land of exiles, where they might find a semblance of peace despite its desolation. The armed infected express concern about their place in Kazdel, but Mudrock assures them that it's a suitable refuge given their current plight. The discussion turns to the reality of Lithinian attitudes and the need to move quickly to avoid further conflict. Later, Mudrock and Greythroat have a reflective conversation with Folinick about their experiences and losses. Mudrock speaks of the ongoing struggle and the harsh truth that peace might be only found in Kazdel, while Greythroat and Folinick confront their own feelings of failure and the limits of their own actions. Mudrock departs with a bouquet, signaling the end of their interaction, leaving Folinick and Greythroat to face the aftermath and make their way back to Rhodes Island, accepting their need to move on and honor those they've lost. Thank you for watching. Please follow my Twitter and Blue Sky for updates, and please check out my other Girls Frontline and Azure Lane videos as well. There will be a teaser out tomorrow for next week's character summaries.